What's up, everybody? TYT Sports on this Friday. That is the Reverend Jayar Jackson.
That's that gangster. Can we say that on there right now?
I don't care.
I don't know if you, I know you don't care. I'm talking about like the happy people out there.
Well, you were asking me.
Are you watching with your children?
You weren't asking Bart, you were asking me.
Are you watching with your children? I'm talking about like FCC. If you're watching with your children, we curse on this show sometimes. And also, if you think your children don't know what curse words are, they do. I have one and he knows.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, he doesn't say them.
How do you know he knows?
Because if stop for 5 seconds, listen to your kids' friends, they're all saying it.
And your kid is how old?
6. No, my kid doesn't say it, but I know it's swirling in his head somewhere because his friends say it. They say really bad stuff.
I'll tell you what my mom did.
Like I was going, and like I have no problem with them. Like words are words, right?
Right.
Kid eventually, I remember when I first started cussing. Sorry, side note.
No, go ahead.
I remember when I first started cursing. It was a beautiful moment.
It was. It's a freeing moment.
I waited a long time. I was like a sophomore in high school. It was always in my head though, right?
I'm glad you're making up for lost time when we see you every day.
My car broke down and I said, but it's such a piece of and my mom was there. I was like, damn.
Yeah. I'll tell you.
The problem was I was telling the truth because it was a piece of shit. It was 1985 Chevy Chevette.
I don't even know what that looks like.
Exactly. Go ahead.
My quick story. My oldest sister and I would always fight. And my mom would have to find a way to control both of us. And we would swear at each other. We despised one another. We'd be out to dinner. We would start yelling at one another because she provokes me. She was a dick, still is. And my mom out of nowhere would think of something and she would out of nowhere, dead silence, drop a bar of soap on the table. And we were like,
wash it out.
Do you know what this means?
Wash it out with soap.
Yeah, you got a bad mouth? Well, wash that shit out with soap. Janice Strom didn't play around, man. She was tough. But I love her. All right, so our main story today, and this is going to be near and dear to many people who hail from Seattle or are just fans of the Supersonics, on what occurred with the Sonics literally being taken away from the city of Seattle, all the politicians that really didn't give a damn to save the Sonics, and maybe David Stern being complicit. So let's just go over the entire history here. So Sam Schulman at first purchased the expansion franchise Supersonics right there as you see, and that was in 1966. They had great players. They had Mr. Sonic, Nate McMillan. I mean, not only are you gonna see him looking fresh as hell, but also remember, his coaching career is like a cat with 9 lives. Because he just kept coaching. Remember, he coached this team and that team, coached the Blazers, coached many others, coached the Pacers. Like he's always been coaching. Like
well, I mean, I guess depending on in what circumstances he loses those jobs. Like it's because he's
bad. There you go.
He's the Norv Turner.
Sorry to rain on your parade.
Of the NBA.
Yeah, seriously. So we'll get into this in just a second, but that was the brand new Key Arena. And David Stern was like, yes, it's a very nice building. I like it very much. So let's go back to 79 for a second. So Seattle won the NBA title in 1979. So now the city is like, oh my God, this is gonna be Graphic 93. Oh my God, I can't believe it. Like they're finally winning and now we have some winning culture here in the city of Seattle. And then Sam Schulman sold to an Iowan named Barry Ackerley, excuse me. And this is where you would think it gets built up because they had more guys like Sean Kemp. I mean, do we have to even say anything else that's attached with his name? He's the embodiment of Seattle Supersonic basketball. By the way, those jerseys, so good.
I should call my good friend Gary Payton and ask him about that.
No,
he's a personal friend of mine. We talk all the time.
Sound
I mean,
like
sometimes strategizing.
No, Gary Payton, he's a dear friend. He's a dear friend of mine. You know, I'm not trying to bring on anybody's parade. I'm not trying to do it. Dear friend. So Gary Payton and the Seattle Supersonics, formerly, let me just start with the latter. The Seattle Supersonics won the #2 pick in the lottery. I know this is hard to see, but this is Gary Payton in this photo. He is second to the left. Gary Payton goes second, and now he's a Seattle Supersonic for 13 years. But here's where the turmoil, and we start to make our first wide right turn. Everyone knows about Starbucks coffee, of course. The founder of Starbucks coffee is Howard Schultz. Howard Schultz and his entire group buys the Seattle Supersonics and the WNBA's Seattle Storm. That then leads to our favorite, a dear friend, Gary Payton, now having a dispute with Howard Schultz. There is Payton, a 13-year. He's not happy with the Sonics. I really don't think he knows anything about basketball. I mean, these are fighting words, ladies and gentlemen. So here is where the politicians, and look, you have worked for TYT for umpteen years. You know what political rhetoric sounds like. Here's what it did. When we were just talking, they were just talking about the benefits that Seattle, the Sonics give to the community of Seattle. In terms of our image as a city, I don't think the Sonics' effect matters. Maybe it did 40 years ago when they first came here. Wow, strong words. On an economic basis, near zero. On a cultural basis, close to zero. Wow. We would still have 2 sports, and plenty of cities our size doesn't have 3 sports. Now he's talking about the Mariners and of course the Seattle Seahawks. Why do you look so dumbfounded when you see
Okay, so if you're the mayor of a city and your city, the size of your city is outperforming other cities that rival in its size, and then you have 3 teams.
Yes.
Usually, do you represent your city by going, we can lose one? I mean, it doesn't really matter. I mean, do you guys know how good we're doing? Why can't we do worse? What are you talking about?
Exactly.
This is weird.
It's so stupid.
It's like if you're the head of a company, you're like, man, I didn't know we'd grow this fast in 5 years.
Right.
This was a 10-year plan. Maybe we should just slash everything in half and lose half of our money so we can go back to our slow growth.
Right.
What are you talking about?
What are you talking about, man? So the politicians were in on this as well because they did not want to they didn't want to try to garner taxpayer dollars for funding a new arena. I think Key Arena was one of the worst buildings according to many in Seattle. It held the fewest amount, for a better word, fewest amount of fans. There's Key Arena once again. Look, it was great when it opened, but as we know, over time, stadiums along with people evolve a little bit. Right. Now it is all completely commercial, and the NBA wanted to have another means of revenue, which we currently see in my hometown of Chicago at the United Center with like, all right, we gotta have this store and that store and this thing and that thing and food courts and da-da-da, blah, 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 da-da-da. Like Key Arena was not gonna be that. So then we're gonna show this video. Howard Schultz then went to legislation. He was starting to get pissed. The fans weren't liking him, put bad people in positions to make big basketball moves. Do I see Johan Petro on that list? Do I see Robert Swift on that list? So, and then of course they traded Sean Kemp for Vin Bay. Like it was a totally terrible thing that happened with the Supersonics. Howard Schultz then goes in front of politicians in Seattle, drags David Stern over and is like, please give us a new arena. Take a look.
Everything about this ownership group and everything about the Seattle Storm and the Seattle Supersonics is Northwest. And we do not want to see that in any way go away.
I guess I would say that a state-of-the-art facility is a great thing for a community to have. Key Arena is not a state-of-the-art facility. Substantial amount of work has been done for the baseball and football teams. And I'm here personally to find out whether the same is being considered fairly for the NBA. If not, that's a decision that we can accept, but then we'll have to act on it ourselves.
That's the most important point, is that David Stern said, give us something new or we're getting the hell out of Dodge. Now, if you're hearing that as an NBA fan, you're thinking, please help us out. Mm-hmm. Please try and give us a new stadium. Yeah, I'll pay a bit more taxes in order to keep an NBA team in my city. So he sort of fired the first shot there. So
he's making a call to the residents, citizenry, mayor. I mean, I'm not sure exactly who he's looking, because I mean, we saw this happen with San Diego too, with the Chargers league, now the Los Angeles Chargers, right?
Yes.
I think this is their second year here now. I can't even remember anymore.
Who cares?
No one's thinking about them. Yeah. But so there's the dispute between whether or not they want where citizens are willing to do so. How important that is in doing those kinds of tax hikes for citizens. And if you have, of course, if you have a namesake, some company that's gonna put their name to it and how much they'll put towards it. Right. Like all the business side of it, I've always been on this outer crust understanding of how it all works. Because I remember when things were going down in San Diego for the Chargers, and I was like, well, this is simple.
Right.
These many businesses are billion-dollar businesses. I mean, they can't keep it in the community.
Right.
For that, but I mean, I guess it doesn't always fall on their shoulders, and I guess the pressure always goes to the less powerful than the most powerful. You don't go to the head of companies and go, you know what, you guys, we're gonna start leaning on you to do this, or we're gonna start talking about how bad you look.
The problem was, and you're gonna see this man next, the Speaker of the House, his name is Frank Chop. Now, learning about Frank Chop with his really gnarly mustache, I must say. I mean, he's modeling after Jeff Fisher, I believe. So Frank Chop is that man right there. He is the gatekeeper for every single law that occurred under his reign in Seattle, in the state of Washington, excuse me. Here is what he said to David Stern when Stern met with him privately, according to Brian Robinson. According to multiple people with knowledge of the sitch, Chop broke the initial silence by stating bluntly to Stern, you know I will say no on Key Arena renovations. I know I will say no. How long do we have to sit in a room together before we can pretend we just tried and just say no? Already you are learning every single politician, not every, but majority, were against this. And we're against funding for a new arena or even putting together a lot of money into renovating Key Arena. So then, unfortunately, as you are going to see in this next video, Clay Bennett, and I believe that this is no sound, Clay Bennett goes in and buys the team from Howard Schultz. Now, Clay Bennett, as many people know, his wife and her family previously have owned the Oklahoman. They are mega millionaires. Huge money millionaires. So he took that money, bought the Seattle Supersonics, and this was a big problem. Well, we'll play this in just a second, because as you are about to hear, that is Howard Schultz, who is going to be introducing Clay Bennett, and Clay makes a promise that unfortunately, as you will learn in this clip, he does not keep.
Although this is extremely difficult, and for me personally, disappointing, I'm really proud to be able to announce that after careful analysis of all the possible scenarios, the Basketball Club of Seattle has entered into an agreement with the Professional Basketball Club, LLC, to purchase the Seattle Supersonics and the Seattle Storm. We feel that we have selected the absolute best buyer for our teams in the Professional Basketball Club, LLC, led by Clay Bennett on my left, chairman of Dorchester Capital, located in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. The Professional Basketball Club is committed to the future success of the teams in Seattle. Committed to the future success of the teams in Seattle, which includes ensuring that the teams can play in an arena that is designed to support the requirements of a viable NBA franchise. We arrived at a place with a buyer who really wants to stay here. And we would not have sold it to a team, to a new owner, who we felt was going to take the team away.
It's a shame.
So at this point, you can look back on it and, okay, from not knowing, for folks who may not know the whole story, I mean, we know where they are now, where the team resides.
Yes.
But would say like, well, something must have gone wrong. Anytime someone makes this kind of declaration, you repeat the line twice. Find someone who wants to make sure it stays in Seattle. Like, that was stressed. So it could be like, okay, it was out of his hands. He was lied to as well.
In a way, yes. I think he also viewed it as, well, the fans hate me. The team isn't performing. I think the final numbers were I bought them for $200 million or $100 million. He then made $150 million more than when he purchased them. I think he just wanted to get completely out of ownership. He said that it was stressful. Look, obviously, we're not gonna know what this is like, I believe, in our lifetime of owning a team. I can understand how it would be stressful, but he chose someone without really caring for Seattle. That's the biggest part of this. So, as you saw right there and via the Times News, the Sonics were sold to an Oklahoma City group, but may stay in Seattle. So let's introduce you to another main character. His name is Clay Bennett. He is the chairman of the PBC LLC. Now, remember him because, well, you're probably gonna wanna punch him in the face after this. So, ownership group purchasing the Sonics. You could go through the names and that's cool. What is the most important point, Scaramucci's funny. What's the most important point about all of this? None of these guys have any connection to Seattle. So the entire owner, another huge red flag, the entire ownership group No one has any ties to Seattle at all. There is Howard Schultz in the middle, Wally Walker, former Sonics GM on the far left, introducing Clay Bennett, who was holding up a Sonics jersey and then probably soon thereafter burned it to the ground. So here's what Clay Bennett had to say via the New York Times. Pay attention to all of the dates, by the way. This is 2006. Certainly we hope for basketball in Oklahoma City, but that's unrelated to this transaction. As it relates to the Sonics, we're very clear we're going through a process which we hope will be successful and where we hope will bring a world-class facility to this Seattle's market. Now, what I want everyone to pay attention after we show this next one is the asterisk, because this is very important. This is only 5 months after purchasing the team. He goes on the record, Seattle Times, we are acutely interested and very focused on bringing a team to Oklahoma City. It's a tricky spot to be in because you don't want to overstep your boundaries, but the Sonics, yes, are a possibility in a team that would do well, not just here, but I'm sure anywhere that they played. Now let's go back to this whole Key Arena renovations thing. This is very similar to misleading the facts. I brought this up previously. Remember when John Elway said like, oh, we offered Colin Kaepernick a contract. He refused to take that contract. Now, when we really dig into it, it's like, no, he actually wasn't kneeling yet. There wasn't much going on with there being a
pay cut on that contract that you offered him.
Exactly. So with this whole Key Arena renovation, here are the designs of the new arena that Clay Bennett wanted to put out in the Seattle area. The reason I say Seattle is because it's not in Seattle. It is in Renton, Washington. Also, this facility, let's keep this up for a second because it looks great. Like this would fit in 2018 and this was 11 years ago. This stadia would be the most expensive at that time in NBA history. So Clay Bennett's like, well, wait a second. I can devise a plan where I know politicians are gonna say no, the taxpayers are gonna say no. Why don't I just go all out? Why don't I just say, look, I'm gonna make Disneyland and I'm gonna take in Space Mountain and I'm gonna bring Six Flags and Coachella and everything into one. Because he knew where everybody's beliefs would lie if he were to throw out a preposterous thing like this.
So you put it out there to make it look like you're really into it.
Yes.
Again, I'll say it again. Like you said, it was 5 months after the purchase of the team. People with this kind of money and this kind of clout don't have things unplanned.
Yeah, that's a good point.
If you've made hundreds of millions of dollars, if you own companies that have made this much money, you didn't do it by accident. You didn't do it by not planning. You didn't do it by not having a plan of attack. You didn't do it without having a goal. So when you buy a team and they end up moving, you don't go, oh, how would I know? I don't run anything. I don't plan a multi-million-dollar company. I don't own that. I'm just some guy. I'm the intern.
I'm an intern.
No, you know what you're doing.
Of course, so it's premeditated.
Yeah, but and again, maybe it was the perfect storm. Again, I mean, ironically, based off of the name of these teams in the city. But it was a perfect storm. He's like, I can do it and act like I really want to be involved in this.
Right.
But I know it's not going to work because the city, at least the I guess the powers that be of the city, aren't going to allow it.
Exactly.
So I'm off the hook.
Exactly. So what was the final number is what you're gonna see right here. It was a proposed $500 million Renton Arena and softened his stance on whether it should go to a public vote. So he's already just gutting this entire city of an NBA franchise. But Bennett said team owners won't pay for any cost overruns, and with the legislature skeptical over the $300 million plus bill the taxpayers already sought, so there's already something going on, it's not clear whether the building will ever become more than ink on paper, which is what Jim Bruner wrote in 2007, and obviously has become very true. Bennett has said he would move the basketball teams unless a new arena deal is reached. The teams say they can't make money at Key Arena, the smallest venue in the NBA. Here's where we have yet another red flag in this entire scenario, and it is what many were calling the smoking gun to this entire case, which is an email exchange between one in the group of co-owners and the group spearheaded by Clay Bennett. Here's what Tom Ward wrote to Clay Bennett. Is there any way to move? And check out the date as well. This is April of 2007. They haven't moved yet. Is there any way to move here as in Oklahoma City for next season, or are we doomed to have another lame duck season? A lame duck season in Seattle, where Bennett wrote back, I am a man possessed. We'll do everything we can. Thanks for hanging with me, boys. The game is getting started. So when he was questioned about all of this, JR and everybody watching, here was his BS response. I was shocked because I remember writing that email and I remember feeling passionate about the fact that we're going to find a way to get this done in Seattle.
This is in response to the obvious email exchange that had nothing to do with in Seattle. I mean, it has to become to the point where you say, you know, yeah, we want to move the team to Oklahoma City, and we just didn't see a way to stay in Seattle.
Totally.
Just say it, because we know that's what it was.
Totally,
And
but
by the way,
he couldn't say it yet, was the main point. It's sort of like, yeah, I'm gonna go completely around what I'm actually doing. Like, that's pretty much how he went after it. So I'm gonna skip ahead just one graphic further. This is also another huge red flag. This was in 2007. Aubrey McClendon, who unfortunately passed away, told the Journal Record newspaper, "We didn't buy the team to keep it in Seattle. We hope to come here. We know it's a little more difficult financially here in Oklahoma City, but we think it's great for the community, and if we could break even, we'd be thrilled." He was fined $250,000 for that. And yet, when all of this occurred, and all of these emails went about, David Stern, gonna skip ahead here to J6. David Stern, none too pleased about being questioned about this. And by the way, this is a complete defense mechanism with how he's going to answer this question about the Clay Bennett emails.
Have you had a chance to read through those emails?
My response, as I've been reminded, wasn't lengthy at all. So
have you read through those emails, especially those between Mr. Bennett and the other owners?
Live or not, I don't like to be interrupted, and I'm not going to interrupt you. So why don't we just go to the next question?
How tied are you right now to taking the franchise name, team colors, and franchise history with you to Oklahoma City?
I think at the end of the day, I believe the name should probably stay.
And as we know, it didn't. As we know. Was it? Go ahead.
Well, it's weird that David Stern talked about being interrupted, because it's exactly what he did from the beginning. When he was asking about did you get a chance to read these emails? And I mean, I was like, wow. I said, that was the first thought I actually had. I was like, man, that's your first indication when someone cuts you off. They don't want this question to end. They don't want this. They don't want to have that second of silence so that people can interpret what that means. And then he brought up being interrupted. No, it's pretty obvious. You know, when you're on the defense and when you know that you're in the wrong, you're trying to, and things are starting to close in on you, and now evidence is being revealed, then you have to get a little bit snipey.
Very much so, and he did. And here's what Seattle did in return. What would be their final season? Let's go back for just 1 second. In their final season, here is what fans chanted at Key Arena, which of course would be no more. This is J5, Seattle Supersonics fans at Key Arena, really just, it sounds more like not chanting, but pleading. So they were saying save our Sonics. I know it was a little difficult to hear, but even Kevin Durant, young Kevin Durant was even, let's hear it. They were put in a tough position. This ownership group, by the way, also did not want any players doing any interviews with the media, rarely giving any bites aside from right after the game or pregame, which mandatorily they have to do. They did not go on local radio. They did not help out in the community. This was a push by Clay Bennett and the mainly not even mainly, the entire OKC-based ownership group saying we want to try and put a divide between the team and the community. They did so. So when all of this occurred, Howard Schultz then planned to sue the Sonics owners because he wanted to try and keep them not only in Seattle, but it seems like also save face because he just wasn't good. like even though you know you're gonna lose, it's like, yeah, I'll still swing a little.
Yeah, again, like this guy, I mean, these are all multimillionaires. They're heads
billionaires.
Billionaires, yeah, they're heads of companies. And this could have been the one thing he didn't fully vet. But then maybe he's out, maybe he's checked out. Maybe he's like, I'm retiring, I don't actually care who this goes to.
Right.
And that's bad. I'm giving him the best case scenario. And that's bad in itself.
Right.
To be like, yeah, I've been a part of this community, I care about it, and I can see what can happen, but I don't really care if I hand it off to whoever. I don't know.
Totally, that's how I feel about him.
It's a weird analogy, and I'll give it anyway, because I've been looking extensively lately for an old classic car, right?
Okay.
And if you've had one and you finally have to sell it, a lot of times sellers of old classic cars that they actually cared about, they have for the past 20 years, they've refurbished, they've done all these things to, and it's become a part of their family. I'm the second owner, I've had it since 1983. It's a 67 Chevy, right? And then you sell it to someone, you're like, I wanna make sure it goes to a good home and a good owner that's gonna take care of it. because if you destroy it, it's gonna hurt me even though I'm not connected to it anymore.
Right.
It's the same. It's a similar thing. But if you just go, yeah, there's some punk kid who's gonna totally drag race it and run the wheels off and not care about anything part of it, it's gonna hurt you a little bit.
Yeah.
But you go, I'm done with it, I'll give it away.
So that is basically what Howard Schultz did, and I agree with that assessment. So then, in April of 2008, the NBA met with their owners, and all but 2 owners said no to the move to go to Oklahoma City. Sonics get move approval. And I don't know why Isaiah Thomas is there. Just forget about him. We should have blurred out his face. But the Sonics got the approval, and that's the most important part of this excerpt. Now, the 2 owners, does anybody, you want to take a guess real quick? The 2 owners that said no when David Stern met with all other NBA owners about this potential
2
move?
said no.
Only 2, that was it.
Well, I saw Isaiah Thomas, he wasn't an owner, but he's probably to blame.
You blame for anything.
Oh, man.
I'll just tell you.
Lakers?
Nope. It was,
Bus?
who?
Wasn't Bus?
No, it was Mark Cuban and Paul Allen. Those were the only 2. God rest his soul, Paul Allen.
Yeah,
So,
if you told me Mark Cuban, I'd have thought that would have been Bus, but maybe not.
so here's another major player in this. It is Greg Nichols, former Seattle mayor. I say former because he didn't get elected after this. So here's a picture of Greg Nichols. He's another humongous player in this because he's really gonna kill Seattle when he decided, well, he opened a lawsuit. What are you doing? What was this? Can we go to JR and then go to the picture again?
It's a funny picture. I was like, what's he describing? You can never be caught in a picture. You can never be caught in a picture making any kind of sizing references with your fingers or hands. You can't do it.
Girth. All right, so getting back to it. So here was another humongous play, and it was by Steve Ballmer, who, granted, you might see him dance like an idiot. He's the most lovable idiot in all the NBA. He put together a proposal where he would literally just throw in $150 million to become an owner and try to help out Key Arena renovations. Just keep the team in Seattle. That's all that they wanted to do. You see it highlighted right there. His group would provide $150 million. So while that's going on, and that was in March, then we had the lawsuit in June where basically Greg Nichols and the city of Seattle tried to sue the Bennett Group by saying they never wanted to keep the team in Seattle. They still have a lease agreement for 2 years at Key Arena. They need to honor that contract. Here's where Greg Nichols completely tripped over himself in his testimony. Brad Keller, representing Clay Bennett and company, Mr. Mayor, you agree, don't you, that in this facility and under this lease, an NBA tenant cannot be successful? He's like, yeah. So then Clay Bennett was testifying and he's like, we made a very well considered and thoroughly discussed decision not to expand our group beyond the Oklahoma City group. So then the city attorney is like, well, wait a minute. Within a few days of being a man possessed to stay in Seattle, you contacted the NBA and you asked, is there any way for us to move to Oklahoma City for the next season? Is that correct? He goes, yes. Paul Lawrence, city attorney. So the man possessed to stay in Seattle, first thing he does is call the NBA and say, how can we move to Oklahoma City next season? Clay Bennett's response, I don't think it was the first thing I did. It was among the expansion of our process. So not really saying no. He's more so acknowledging it. In that same period of time, in addition to talking to the NBA about how to move the team to Oklahoma City, you contacted the city manager of Oklahoma City to reserve dates in Oklahoma City for the next season. Is that correct? Yes.
He's like, I wasn't planning to be under oath today. So I guess I gotta say yes. My original answer was no.
Right. Hey, he put his hand on that Bible. He's got to tell the truth. All right, so here's the very important point. Can we go back to Greg Nichols showing his girth again for just 1 second? So Greg Nichols completely screws Seattle, okay?
Like
and
this.
I screwed them that much. So Greg Nichols, according to many reports, an hour, maybe 2 hours tops. And Seattle has a real good chance of keeping the Sonics. Strikes a deal with Clay Bennett. They don't go to a decision by the judge. They settle. The city of Seattle settles where they had a really good shot of keeping the Sonics. And here it is via the Seattle Times. The picture is perfect of the fan, by the way. The Sonics and the city reach a settlement. The city of Seattle will be paid $45 million in exchange for letting the Sonics move. Why do you not see what the decision would be from the judge? What happened behind closed doors? There's only 2 scenarios here. Either Nichols was going to make something off of this, or the counter is, well, we weren't going to win. They told us that we weren't going to win, so let's take $45 million. Either way, you know what I do if I'm Greg Nichols? I die on that decision because you stand up for your entire city. He sold the city out.
Something about $45 million really did it for him. I mean, he was in debt. I don't know what it is he needed. He made a bad bet.
Horrible.
His horse didn't come in. I don't know.
How do you do that?
He didn't care. There's some people, just because you live in a city and have been there and represent it, doesn't mean you necessarily have the best interests of the city in mind. It happens a lot with politicians. And you think you can just fly under the radar.
That's actually a good point, because in his testimony as well, he was asked by the Bennett lawyer, how many games would you say you've been to? None. Oh. How about the Schultz ownership? How many games have you been to? None. So Greg Nichols also used the Sonics pretty much as a prop to try and help his own political gain. He was not reelected after this. However, Oklahoma City, well, they were given a franchise. And here was Clay Bennett addressing the Oklahoma City media.
The NBA will be in Oklahoma City next season, playing their games.
Oh, that's smug.
You had to make sure that they knew that they'd be playing their games in Oklahoma City, not that they'd just be staying there.
Had to know.
On off days.
Right. So here's the Daily Oklahoman on July 3rd, 2008. In his own words, we made it. Now that we have laid this out for you, your final thoughts on Seattle being gutted with an NBA franchise.
It doesn't make it so much worse, because obviously this is all, that's happened in public, but to put it together in its perspective from start to finish, because people still talk about it. There was the preseason game when the Warriors played up in Seattle.
Yep.
And it was very special because Kevin Durant, he got drafted there, spent like a year or whatever, was it? I can't remember year he came in. Spent a year there, and there's still those Durant jerseys where sometimes you see them and people go, somebody made that up because that's fun. No one really remembers that. So if you start, my first thought was, now you imagine Russell Westbrook in a Sonics jersey, James Harden in a Sonics jersey, and then those championship runs. Yeah.
Yep.
It looks and feels good.
It does.
Of what it could have looked like.
Do you think they'll get a franchise? NBA franchise?
Eventually. I don't think it's gonna happen very soon. They're trying to make pushes, but it would have to be, look, there's no way it can be another expansion. So what small city with 3 teams that needs to downsize and not like what they're doing?
Isn't Vegas being talked about as well? Is getting an NBA franchise? I'm pretty sure I saw that too. So
hockey's worked out. Here come the Raiders.
It has.
Maybe they can win a game next season.
So now Vegas will have 3 teams.
They're overperforming what we believed. It's just a city in the desert.
So we end with this. I feel for Seattle. I really, really do. I went there for the Final Four. It's a great city.
Yeah.
It really is a phenomenal city. What happened has many layers. It is not the fans' fault. It is their local politicians who were in power. I believe the NBA is to blame, and Howard Schultz is to blame as well, because he just wanted to get out and he didn't care what happened to the franchise. Where do you stand on all this? Certainly do let us know. We appreciate everybody watching. Check out our clips at youtube.com/TYT Sports. Do you know what you could get for $4.99? Maybe 1 pack of Skittles. You know what's better? A lot of content. So download the TYT app, available on iOS and Android.